Dream Tactics is part turn-based strategy game, part deck builder, and it's an enjoyable experience in both cases. It's got a lot of structural similarities to some of the dorkiest card PGs, like Gwent the Witcher Tales and Warhammer 40k Space Wolf. It complements the usual role-playing thrills of new weapons and new armor, with new decks and new cards. But it also borrows a little bit from Nintendo. Aside from the obvious Fire Emblem influence in the strategy UI, the Game Boy Advance in general is a named visual inspiration for the pixel art. Your little pillow enemies look like the menu sprites from early-gen Pokemon games. A GBA-like simplicity can also be felt in its bubbly low-stakes style and its snappy gamepad-preferred control scheme. You can imagine playing this one with only a D-pad and 2 buttons if you wanted to, though some tooltips and extras are mapped to the other keys. Some of the minutiae of its tactics rules don't gel super well with the cards, and most of the stuff that happens outside of the battles feels kind of superfluous, but none of that stifles the satisfying card-based progression and strategic combat that makes Dream Tactics worthwhile. I'm about 12 hours into an unfinished playthrough because I elected to play Dream Tactics on its hardcore mode with permadeath. That doesn't scale down well into a short pre-release period, so just keep in mind that I haven't seen the final battles or story moments here. Though I have seen most everything else. Part of what makes Dream Tactics unique, and part of why I think it's particularly well suited for hardcore, is that its 5 worlds have a largely non-linear structure after the tutorial. Difficulty tends to increase within a world rather than between them, so if you're playing on anything other than easy, your usual flow is going to be to play a world up until you get too hard of a battle, then jump to a new world to power up. Experience is paced in such a way that you usually get 1 full level from each encounter, which gives a few passive stat bonuses and some extra equipment slots for each of your 3 to 4 party members. It feels great. The balance is tight enough that the tension from a battle just too hard to relieving that tension with some deck modification or level ups is frequent. When you're actually in an encounter, you have simple grid movement rules but with attacks and spells that are entirely tied to your deck. The 3 starting characters you spend most of your time with come with decks that loosely follow mage, warrior, and stance and cavalry archetypes, but they're themed up to match Dream Tactics' silly designs. The default mage deck is about applying drowsiness to foes, then spending it for damage or healing modifiers. The default warrior deck is piloted by a bunny girl, so you get all these interactions of planting and harvesting carrots in between conventional sword swings. The cavalry is all about travel distance, with lots of easy access to extra mobility, and ways to weaponize that mobility with squares traversed damage bonuses. They're all well defined enough that they slot into roles from the start, but they're flexible enough to adapt into other styles too. Not only are there plenty of cards you can pick up in the overworld, you can also splash them cross-character thanks to a limited borrow other classes cards budget that everyone gets. There's lots of strategies you can develop, and they can be influenced or outright created by equipment as well. Outside of the decks, you can assign raw stat bonuses or unique effects to each character. Dimensional Bomb, for example, is an equipment that helps take the sting off of misses by giving you an explosion every time you miss. In a vacuum, it's just there to help you salvage bad rolls, but outside of a vacuum, you can combo it with cards and other equipment, like Sleeping Mask, that increase your chance to miss, and try to force that explosion instead. There's lots of interactions like that if you look for them, and it nails that card game excitement of letting each card feel like a solution to a problem you may not have run into yet. But maybe the most powerful interaction is one that sits outside of the card text. There's a small rules quirk that trivializes a lot of these encounters, and if you've played Space Wolf, it's a problem you may be familiar with. Card games just do not map well to strategy game Fog of War, and though there isn't exactly fog here, your enemies are beholden to something like it. There are discrete and readable aggro ranges for every enemy mob, which also means you could just not walk into them until you're prepared. You can fully heal, fully buff, and here's why it's weird with cards, just stand still and draw turn after turn until you have the perfect hand. Once you see that play, you can't unsee it. And though many encounters will at least slightly punish this by holding timed rewards over your head, many of them don't. It's too ubiquitous of a strategy to be as powerful as it is, and effectively dices every major conquest into multiple small skirmishes with free resets and perfect first hands after each if you're willing to spend the time fatiguingly drawing over and over again. But that's an exception to how well Dream Tactics otherwise comes together. Its freedom to traverse worlds in any order gives the game a ton of variety, and makes its hardcore challenge tough but not masochistic, and its new card unlocks give you a satisfying and ever-expanding toolkit to solve battles with. It's pretty good.